Cheating Story Exposed, the channel dedicated to intense stories of betrayal, deception, and the pursuit of truth. Sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from the people closest to you. They come from the institutions you trust with something as simple as a monthly payment. I never thought a gym membership would change my life. But then again, I never thought a gym would steal from me for 2 years straight. My name is Trevor. And this is the story of how I accidentally exposed one of the largest consumer fraud operations in my state's history. It started innocently enough. February 2019. I was 29, working as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Portland, and I'd just moved into a new apartment downtown. Like most people with New Year's resolutions that had survived into February, I decided I needed to get serious about fitness. I'd never been particularly athletic. More of a runner than a gym person. But I'd been sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day for 3 years, and I could feel my body starting to protest. My back hurt. My shoulders were always tight. I was getting winded walking up 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, so I did what millions of people do every year. I joined a gym. The place was called TitanFit. Big franchise operation. You've probably seen them. They had maybe 200 locations across 15 states. Bright blue and silver branding, walls of mirrors, rows of gleaming equipment. The usual setup. The sales guy's name was Kyle. Mid-20s, incredibly enthusiastic, the kind of person who could make doing burpees sound like the secret to eternal happiness. He gave me the full tour, showed me the weight room, the cardio equipment, the pool, the sauna. Honestly, it was nicer than I expected. The membership was $49.99 a month. No enrollment fee if I signed up that day. Month to month. No long-term contract. That was important to me. I'd heard horror stories about gym contracts that were impossible to escape. Kyle assured me it was simple. Month-to-month membership. Cancel anytime with 30 days notice. Just send an email to their membership services department and I'd be done. I signed up on the spot. For the first 3 months, I was actually pretty good about going. 3 times a week, sometimes 4. I had a simple routine. 30 minutes of cardio, some basic strength training done. Nothing fancy. But I was consistent and I could feel the difference. My back pain disappeared. I was sleeping better. I had more energy. Then work got crazy. We were launching a major product update and my team was suddenly pulling 60-hour weeks. I went to the gym maybe twice in April, once in May. By June, I hadn't been in almost a month and I was still paying $50 for the privilege of not using it. That's when I decided to cancel. It was June 15th, a Saturday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop paying bills and I saw the TitanFit charge on my credit card statement. $49.99, same as always, but it annoyed me because I knew I wasn't using it. I pulled up my email and composed a quick message to their membership services address. It was right there on their website, membership@titanfit.com. The email was professional but straightforward. I stated my full name, my membership number, and my request to cancel my membership effective immediately. I understood there might be a 30-day notice period, so I was fine with being charged for 1 more month if necessary. I asked for written confirmation of my cancellation. I hit send at 9:42 a.m. I expected a response within a day or 2. Maybe an automated confirmation email, then a follow-up from an actual person. Standard customer service stuff. I got nothing. A week went by, no response. I checked my spam folder, nothing. I sent a follow-up email on June 22nd. Still nothing. On July 1st, my credit card was charged another $49.99. That's when I got annoyed enough to actually call them. The customer service line put me on hold for 18 minutes. When someone finally picked up, a woman named Brenda. She sounded tired and vaguely irritated. I explained the situation. I'd sent 2 emails requesting cancellation. I hadn't received any response. I'd just been charged again. Brenda asked for my membership number. I gave it to her. I could hear typing on the other end of the line. "I'm not showing any cancellation request in the system," she said. I told her I'd sent 2 emails. I could forward them to her if she needed proof. "Emails don't count," she said. "You have to cancel in person at your home gym location." I felt my jaw tight. That wasn't what Kyle had told me when I signed up. That wasn't what their website said. I pulled up the website on my laptop while I was on the phone with her. And sure enough, it said cancellations could be submitted via email to membership@titanfit.com. I pointed this out. "The website must be outdated," Brenda said. Her tone suggested she'd had this conversation before. "Company policy is in-person cancellation only. You need to go to your home gym and fill out a cancellation form." I asked if I could get a refund for the July charge since I'd requested cancellation before the billing date. "No refunds," she said. "But if you go in today, we can make sure you're not charged for August." I didn't go in that day. I was frustrated, but I told myself I'd deal with it during the week. It was annoying. But it was just $50, not worth ruining my Saturday over. On Monday, I drove to the Titan Fit location during my lunch break. It was about 15 minutes from my office. I walked in, went straight to the front desk, and told the guy working there, name tag said Austin, that I needed to cancel my membership. He nodded, barely looking up from his phone, and handed me a clipboard with a form. Standard cancellation request. Name, membership number, reason for cancellation. Multiple choice options like too expensive, not using enough, moving away. I checked not using enough and signed at the bottom. I handed it back to Austin. He glanced at it, nodded, and tossed it into a plastic tray on the counter that was overflowing with papers. You're all set, he said. You'll get charged for one more month because of the 30-day notice period, but after that you're done. I asked if I'd receive confirmation via email. Usually, he said, within a couple days. I left feeling moderately satisfied. It had been more annoying than it should have been, but it was done, or so I thought. August 1st came. Another $49.99 charge fine. That was expected. 30-day notice period. I let it go September 1st. Another charge. That's when I called again. Different person this time. A guy named Derek. I explained the entire situation. The emails, the phone call with Brenda, the in-person cancellation on July 8th. Derek put me on hold for almost 10 minutes. When he came back, he said, I'm not seeing any cancellation form in the system. I felt my blood pressure rising. I'd handed the form directly to an employee. I'd watched him put it in the tray. Someone must have lost it, Derek said. But don't worry. I can process a cancellation for you right now over the phone. You'll be charged for one more month, and then you're done. I asked about refunds for the previous charges after my cancellation request. Unfortunately, without proof that you submitted the form, we can't issue refunds. But I'm putting the cancellation through right now. He took my information again. He assured me it was processed. He said I'd receive email confirmation within 48 hours. I never got the email. October 1st. Another charge at this point. I was beyond annoyed. This wasn't just incompetence. This felt intentional. I called again. A woman named Patricia answered. I went through the whole story again, now including the second cancellation attempt with Derek. Patricia's response was almost identical to Brenda's had been months earlier. You have to cancel in person. Phone cancellations aren't valid. I pointed out that Derek had told me he could process it over the phone. He shouldn't have said that. Company policy is in person only. I drove to the gym again that afternoon. I was ready for a fight this time. I asked to speak to a manager. The manager's name was Todd. He was probably 40, with the build of someone who'd been a serious athlete once but had let it slide. He listened to my story with a practiced expression of concern, the kind that customer service managers perfect over years of dealing with angry people. I completely understand your frustration, he said. Let me look into this. He disappeared into a back office for about 5 minutes. When he came back, he had a printout. I'm showing that you did submit a cancellation form on July 8th, he said, but it was never processed because the membership account number on the form didn't match our records. I stared at him. I'd written my membership number directly from my membership card. There was no way it was wrong. He showed me the printout. Sure enough, the number I'd written was correct. But in their system, my membership number had apparently been changed at some point. I've been assigned a new number in May, according to their records, and no one had told me. So your form got flagged as invalid and set aside, Todd explained. That's why it never went through. I asked why no one had contacted me to clarify this. That's a good question, he said. That should have happened. I'm sorry it didn't. He processed a new cancellation form right there. Using the correct number this time, he assured me it would go through. He said he'd personally make sure of it. I asked again about refunds for the 4 months of charges after my initial cancellation request. In June, I don't have authority to issue refunds, he said, but I can submit a request to corporate. You should hear back within 2 weeks. I left feeling cautiously hopeful. Todd had seemed genuine. Maybe this would finally be resolved. 2 weeks later. Nothing, no email, no refund. November 1st. Another charge. I called corporate directly this time. It took me 40 minutes of navigating phone menus to reach an actual human being. When I finally did, a woman named Carol. I told her I wanted to file a formal complaint. She took my information. She said she'd escalate it to a supervisor. She said someone would call me within 3 business days. No one called. December 1st. Another charge. At this point, I'd been charged for 11 months total, but I'd only used the gym for 4 of those months. I'd attempted to cancel 5 times through 4 different channels. Email, phone, and in person twice. I'd been given contradictory information every single time. And I was out nearly $550. That's when I decided to do something different. I started documenting everything. I created a spreadsheet, every charge, every date, every email I'd sent, every phone call I'd made, including the name of the person I spoke with and what they told me. I saved screenshots of their website showing the email cancellation policy. I saved copies of all my emails, then I started looking for patterns. I'm a software engineer. Pattern recognition is part of what I do, and as I looked at the timeline of my interactions with TitanFit, something started to feel off. Every person I'd spoken to had given me different information about cancellation policies. Every person had blamed a different part of the system. Every person had promised resolution that never came. It felt systematic. I started Googling. TitanFit cancellation problems. TitanFit won't let me cancel. TitanFit billing issues. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of forum posts, hundreds of complaints on the Better Business Bureau website, multiple threads on Reddit, people describing almost exactly the same experience I'd had. Emails ignored, phone cancellations not processed, in-person forms lost, contradictory policies, unauthorized charges continuing for months or even years. One person claimed they'd been charged for 3 years after canceling. Another said they'd tried to cancel 7 times before finally having to cancel their credit card and get a new one issued just to stop the charges. The complaints went back years. This wasn't a recent problem. This was how TitanFit operated. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about me anymore. This wasn't about my $550. This was about a company that was systematically defrauding potentially thousands of people. And I decided I was going to do something about it. I started by filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. I detailed everything, every interaction, every charge, every false promise. I attached my documentation. The BBB response came back 2 weeks later. TitanFit had responded to my complaint. Their response stated that I had failed to follow proper cancellation procedures and that all charges were valid per the terms of service. They offered no refund. Next, I filed a complaint with the Oregon Department of Justice Consumer Protection Division. This was more involved. I had to fill out a detailed form, provide copies of all my documentation, and write a narrative explaining the situation. I submitted it on December 20th, 2019. Then I waited. January came. Another $49.99 charge. I was now 12 months past my initial cancellation request. I called my credit card company and disputed the charges. All of them, every charge from July onward. I explained the situation, that I'd attempted to cancel multiple times, that the company had refused to process my cancellation, that I had documentation of everything. The credit card company opened an investigation. They issued a temporary credit for the disputed amount while they reviewed the case. TitanFit fought it. They provided the credit card company with copies of their terms of service, which stated that cancellations had to be submitted in writing to corporate headquarters via certified mail. A policy that literally no one at TitanFit had ever mentioned to me, and which wasn't stated anywhere on their website. The credit card company ultimately sided with TitanFit. The temporary credit was reversed. I was back to owing all the disputed charges plus a chargeback fee. I felt like I was fighting a hydra. Every time I tried one avenue, I hit a wall. Every time I thought I'd found a solution, it fell apart. But then, February 11th, 2020, I got an email. It was from the Oregon Department of Justice, an investigator named Lawrence Hartman. He wanted to talk to me about my complaint against TitanFit. We scheduled a phone call for the next day. Lawrence Hartman turned out to be exactly what you'd imagine a consumer protection investigator to be. Mid-50s, calm, methodical, and I could tell within the first 2 minutes of talking to him, genuinely angry about what TitanFit was doing. He asked me detailed questions about every interaction I'd had with the company. He took notes. He asked for copies of all my documentation, which I sent over immediately after the call. Then he told me something that made my stomach drop. You're the 47th person to file a complaint about TitanFit in Oregon in the last 18 months, he said. And based on what I'm seeing, this isn't incompetence. This is a business model. He explained that his office had been monitoring TitanFit for over a year. They'd noticed the pattern of complaints. They'd reached out to other states with TitanFit locations and found similar patterns everywhere the company operated. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. TitanFit deliberately made it as difficult as possible to cancel memberships. They created multiple contradictory cancellation policies. They trained staff to give inconsistent information. They lost paperwork. They ignored emails. They created bureaucratic maze after bureaucratic maze. Most people gave up after 1 or 2 attempts. Some kept paying for months before they noticed. Some noticed but decided it wasn't worth the fight. Even the ones who persisted, like me, usually hit enough walls that they eventually just canceled their credit cards or accepted the loss. TitanFit knew exactly what they were doing. They'd calculated that the revenue from people who couldn't successfully cancel was worth more than the risk of regulatory action. They'd been doing it for years. "We're building a case," Lawrence said. "But we need more evidence, more people willing to come forward, more documentation." I asked what I could do to help. "Keep documenting everything," he said. "And if you're willing, we might need you to testify if this goes to court." I told him I was absolutely willing. Over the next 3 months, I became Lawrence's star witness, not because my case was the worst. There were people who'd been charged for far longer than me. But because my documentation was immaculate, I had everything, every email, every phone call log, screenshots, bank statements, time-stamped records of every interaction. I also became weirdly obsessed with the case. I started tracking every Titan Fit complaint I could find online. I reached out to people who'd posted about their experiences and connected them with Lawrence's office. I created a shared document where victims could add their stories. By May 2020, Lawrence's office had over 200 complaints, and the patterns were undeniable. Then, June 2020, the Oregon Attorney General filed a lawsuit against Titan Fit. The lawsuit was for consumer protection violations, unfair business practices, and systematic fraud. It named Titan Fit's parent corporation and 3 of its executives. It sought restitution for all affected customers, civil penalties, and an injunction to force Titan Fit to change its business practices. I'll never forget the feeling of seeing that lawsuit filing. My name was in it, not as a plaintiff. This was the state suing Titan Fit, not me personally, but as a witness. My documentation was cited multiple times in the complaint. Gone from being one frustrated customer to being part of a state-level legal action against a multi-million-dollar company, Titan Fit's response was exactly what you'd expect. They denied everything. They claimed all cancellations had been processed according to policy. They blamed individual employees for any confusion. They painted themselves as the victims of a few disgruntled customers making mountains out of molehills. Their lawyers were expensive and aggressive. They filed motion after motion to dismiss the case. They argued technicalities. They tried to get evidence thrown out, but Lawrence and the Attorney General's office had done their homework. Every motion was denied. The case moved forward. Discovery was brutal for Titan Fit. The Attorney General's office subpoenaed their internal records, emails, training documents, revenue reports, everything. What they found was even worse than we'd suspected. Titan Fit had internal documents, actual training materials, that instructed staff on how to discourage cancellations. There were scripts for what to say to make the process seem more complicated than it was. There were quotas for how many cancellation requests each location should retain each month. They had financial projections that explicitly calculated expected revenue from retained cancellations. They knew exactly how many people would give up trying to cancel and just keep paying. They'd built their entire business model around it. It was all there in black and white. The case went to trial in November 2020 because of COVID. It was conducted partially remotely, which was surreal. I testified via video call from my apartment. The state's attorney walked me through my entire experience. Every email, every phone call, every trip to the gym, every promise that was broken. Titan Fit's lawyer tried to tear me apart during cross-examination. He suggested I hadn't followed proper procedures. He questioned my documentation. He implied I was exaggerating for attention or money, but my documentation was perfect. Every question he asked, I had a time-stamped record to back up my answer. Every claim he made, I could refute with evidence. I wasn't the only witness. 23 other people testified. Some of them had stories that made mine look mild. There was a woman named Patricia who'd been charged for 4 years. A man named Dennis who'd tried to cancel 14 times. A military service member who'd been deployed overseas and returned to find he'd been charged for 18 months despite having submitted cancellation paperwork before he left. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict came down on December 4, 2020. Titan Fit was found guilty on all counts. The penalties were staggering. $15 million in civil penalties. Full restitution to all affected customers going back 5 years. A permanent injunction requiring them to implement new cancellation procedures that would be monitored by the state for the next 10 years. But here's the thing that made it all real. The Attorney General's office had identified over 9,800 people in Oregon alone who had been affected by Titan Fit's practices. 9,800 people who'd been charged after attempting to cancel. When you extended that nationally, across all 15 states where Titan Fit operated, the estimated number was over 150,000 victims. 150,000 people who'd been systematically defrauded by a gym they just wanted to stop paying for. The restitution process took months. The Attorney General's office had to track down every affected customer. Some people had moved. Some had changed names. Some had passed away. I got my refund check in March 2021. It was for $978.43. That was all the charges from my attempted cancellation date forward plus interest. But it wasn't about the money anymore. Not really. What made it all worth it was the emails I started getting. People I'd never met reached out to thank me. Some had seen my name in news articles about the case. Some had been connected to me through the shared document I'd created. Some had just heard about what happened and wanted to express their gratitude. There was a single mother who'd been charged for 3 years. She'd noticed the charges but didn't have the time or energy to fight it while working 2 jobs and raising 2 kids. The refund check she got, over $4,000, meant she could finally fix her car that had been broken for 6 months. There was a college student who'd been charged for 2 years after graduating and moving across the country. He tried to cancel before he left, but got the same runaround I had. His refund paid for his textbooks for his final semester. There was an elderly man on a fixed income who'd been paying for a gym membership he couldn't afford to use anymore. He tried to cancel but got confused by the contradictory information and eventually gave up. His refund helped him pay for medications he'd been skipping to save money. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real people whose lives had been meaningfully improved because someone had finally held TitanFit accountable. And it had started because I'd been stubborn enough to keep documentation and angry enough to not let it go. TitanFit filed for bankruptcy protection 8 months after the verdict. The combination of the penalties, the restitution payments, and the damage to their reputation was too much. By the end of 2021, all 215 of their locations had closed. Some people might feel bad about that, about putting a company out of business, about the employees who lost their jobs. I don't. The employees who lost their jobs were working for a company that was built on fraud. The company that went out of business was stealing from over 100,000 people, and those locations that closed. They were replaced by other gyms that had to compete fairly because TitanFit wasn't there to undercut them with fraudulent practices anymore. The market corrected itself. As for me, my life didn't change dramatically. I'm still a software engineer. I still live in Portland. I still go running more than I go to gyms, but I learned something important through all of this. Most people, when they're wronged by a corporation or an institution, they give up, not because they're weak or lazy, but because the system is designed to make you give up. It's designed to be exhausting and confusing and frustrating enough that you decide it's not worth the fight, and most of the time, for any individual case, it probably isn't worth the fight. Spending months of your life to recover $550 doesn't make mathematical sense. But sometimes it's not about the math. Sometimes it's about the principle. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them get away with it. Sometimes it's about being stubborn enough to keep going when every reasonable person would have quit. And sometimes, if you're lucky and persistent and thorough, you stumble into something bigger than yourself. You find out that your small problem is actually a massive problem affecting thousands of people. You find out that your documentation and your refusal to give up might be the key to holding a corrupt system accountable. I never intended to become a whistleblower. I just wanted my gym to stop charging me, but that's how these things work sometimes. You start with one small injustice, you refuse to accept it, you keep pushing, and eventually, if you push hard enough, the whole rotten structure comes down. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it again. If I'd spend all that time and energy fighting over a few $100s, and the answer is yes, absolutely yes, because it was never really about the money. It was about being told no by people who thought I'd eventually give up. It was about seeing a wrong and deciding I wasn't going to be part of the majority who just accepted it. It was about proving that one person with documentation and determination can actually make a difference. TitanFit thought they could steal from 150,000 people in tiny amounts. They thought no one would care enough to fight back. They thought they'd calculated the risk correctly. They were wrong, and I was the one who proved it. I still have all the documentation. Hundreds of pages of emails, screenshots, call logs, and records. I keep it in a folder on my computer labeled TitanFit. I probably don't need it anymore. The case is closed, the company is dead, the restitution has been paid. But I keep it anyway, partly as a reminder, partly as evidence that it all really happened, but mostly as a monument to stubbornness, because sometimes, in a world full of systems designed to wear you down, stubbornness is a superpower. Sometimes refusing to give up is the most radical thing you can do, and sometimes, just sometimes, one person who won't shut up and won't go away can bring down an empire built on taking advantage of people who were too tired or too busy or too overwhelmed to fight back. That's the real lesson here. not that corporations are corrupt. We already knew that, not that the system is broken. We already knew that, too. The lesson is that the system only works when people let it work. When people give up, when people decide it's not worth the fight, but when someone decides it is worth the fight, when someone refuses to be just another statistic, when someone turns their personal frustration into meticulously documented evidence, that's when things change. I was just trying to cancel a gym membership. I ended up helping 9,800 people get their money back, all because I was too stubborn to take no for an answer. If you've ever felt cheated by a corporation, if you've ever been told there's nothing you can do, if you've ever been made to feel like your complaint doesn't matter. Remember this story, document everything, keep every email, record every call, take screenshots of everything, and never, ever, assume that your small problem is just your problem, because sometimes your small problem is the thread that, when pulled, unravels an entire fraud operation. Sometimes you're not the only one, and sometimes being stubborn enough to find out makes all the difference.